What's up guys, this is VinylicPuma, back with another video, and today I wanted to briefly talk about Bethesda, Obsidian, and Fallout New Vegas. Or more specifically, I wanted to talk about if Bethesda really hates Fallout New Vegas and Obsidian or not. Now I think the core issue, or the primary cause of why people think Bethesda hates Fallout New Vegas or Obsidian-style Fallout in general, is the result of the controversy surrounding Fallout New Vegas' Metacritic scores. For those of you that are both in and not in the know, Obsidian employee bonuses were tied to Fallout New Vegas' Metacritic score. Specifically, if New Vegas got an 85 on Metacritic, employees would see these bonuses, and if they didn't get higher than an 85 and actually got lower than an 85, they wouldn't receive these bonuses. As things turned out, Fallout New Vegas ended up getting a score of 84, and this, along with an unannounced exclusive for the Xbox One, resulted in a bunch of layoffs and almost destroyed the company. Now, on the one hand, I think it's fair to suggest that Obsidian didn't have to agree to the Metacritic score contract that they had with Bethesda, and that Obsidian themselves are responsible for what happened. Plus, if you think about it, if you get a 4 out of 5 review score from some random outlet, that's the equivalent of an 80 out of 100 on Metacritic, which, given the short development window to make the game, it was sort of dumb of Obsidian to agree to that in the first place. On the other hand, there are also those that contend that ZeniMax took advantage of Obsidian and that the 84 score on Metacritic was the result of Bethesda not allocating the proper resources for QA testing. It is worth noting that New Vegas' end credits indicate that about 3 people, which were all Obsidian employees at the time, handled the QA testing while being supported by a dozen or so of Bethesda Softworks' own QA testers. It is worth pointing out, if you compare the number of listed QA testers for New Vegas to Fallout 3 or Fallout 4, noticeably more people appear in the QA testing sections for the end credits of both Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. What I think we can say for sure, though, is that Obsidian didn't like how things panned out, and during an old 2014 Eurogamer interview, Feargus Urquhart, who is the CEO of Obsidian, had this to say about the controversy. "We have a general policy whenever we're talking to different publishers now. We don't do anything that has to do with Metacritic. It's an unfair way of, well, in a lot of ways, it can only be used as a way to take advantage of a developer. Ultimately, if a game is financially successful, if a developer has back-end royalties on that, then they should make those back-end royalties if they made money for the publisher." At the very least, I think it's fair to say that there was some fallout, no pun intended, over the whole situation. Obsidian was really relying on those bonuses, and because of the deal that they cut with ZeniMax, it really hurt the company when they didn't get those bonuses. While Obsidian has said they're interested in working on another Fallout project again, I think it's safe to say that if Obsidian ever did manage to work on a new Fallout game, then they're going to want those back-end royalties or employee bonuses, which ZeniMax may not be interested in agreeing to. After all, ZeniMax got Obsidian to work without royalties before. Why would they pay them royalties on future projects now? I also have to imagine it puts Bethesda Game Studios, the developer, in a somewhat awkward position as well. After all, Bethesda is a very experienced developer, and they're familiar with other talented development studios across the industry. And while I can't actually verify this is the case, and this is definitely speculation on my part, imagine the following scenario for a moment. You're a talented game developer with a bunch of successful titles under your belt from 2 franchises. Your publisher/parent company wants you to make a sequel in both franchises, but you don't have the resources to do so. So you inform them of this, and you highly recommend this other developer to work on one of the games that you can't work on while you focus all of your efforts on the other. The other developer makes an amazing entry into the franchise that you previously worked on, but due to the contract that they signed with your parent company, they get screwed out of bonuses, and along with some other factors, their company almost gets destroyed. Thus, you're put in a weird situation where you recommended these guys, and things ended up pretty badly for them. If you ask me, this hypothetical scenario could be what happened. We can definitely say for sure that Bethesda Game Studios at the time didn't have the resources to work on both a new Fallout and new Elder Scrolls. So what happened is Bethesda Game Studios knew some of the developers at Obsidian and recommended them to ZeniMax. New Vegas gets made, bad things happen between Obsidian and ZeniMax, developers at both Bethesda Game Studios and Obsidian are horrified, things suddenly get real awkward, and thus, we're in the situation that we're in now, where a fair number of fans think that Bethesda as a whole hates Obsidian. More fuel is added to the fire given Fallout New Vegas' reputation, as it's considered to be the best modern Fallout game by the hardcore fanbase. And on some level, dare I say that I agree with Kotaku's assessment that it must be at least a little weird for someone at ZeniMax to see the fanbase so ravenously excited at the mere hints and rumors of Obsidian making a new Fallout. Especially when you get Eric FensterMaker back in 2016 indicating interest in making a new Fallout and it getting an impressive amount of news coverage. Ultimately, if you ask me, I definitely do think there's probably at least a little tension between Obsidian and ZeniMax over the whole Metacritic score debacle. And it may explain Todd Howard's recent statements about outsourcing future Fallout titles, where he says, and I quote, "I wouldn't say never, but now that our company is so big, it's always better to keep stuff internal. It becomes less likely, but I could never say never. I thought the Obsidian guys did a fabulous job. On a developer level, though, I doubt there's much tension amongst Obsidian and the developers at Bethesda Game Studios. Not only did some of the New Vegas developers from Obsidian move to Bethesda Game Studios to work on Fallout 4, but like I mentioned earlier, Bethesda Game Studios likely recommended Obsidian to develop New Vegas, and after that, things just fell apart with ZeniMax. I also think if Bethesda Game Studios really hated Fallout New Vegas, then they wouldn't have tried to imitate a lot of different elements of it in Fallout 4. Specifically, as far as vanilla Fallout 4 is concerned, I think it's fair to say that the incorporation of factions and having said factions influence the ending was directly pulled from Fallout New Vegas. While I think it's fair to argue that New Vegas may have done its respective factions and how they tie into the game's endings better, Bethesda Game Studios saw this and decided to incorporate it into their own Fallout game because they themselves liked it. As far as other aspects of gameplay are concerned, I think it's fair to say that Bethesda was inspired by New Vegas' hardcore mode and equipment customization and incorporated these in Fallout 4 via survival mode and by making all of the gear totally modular. Speaking of gear, I think it's also fair to say that the XO1 armor was definitely inspired by New Vegas' Enclave armor. And while XO1 was eventually retconned in Nuka World, someone at Bethesda had originally intended on it being the Enclave's original power armor based on Fallout 4's loading screens. I also think it's worth pointing out that Fallout 4 does have its fair share of Fallout New Vegas references. As an example, Fallout 4's Atomic Command minigame features the New Vegas sign rather than the conventional Las Vegas one. And in the Nuka World DLC, there is a loading screen which talks about how Nuka-Cola Wild was meant to be a competitor to Sunset Sarsaparilla. They do say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and while Bethesda Game Studios has certainly made mistakes, like how Jet is now a pre-war drug and XO1 isn't the Enclave power armor anymore, among other issues, I don't think that the designers/developers at Bethesda Game Studios dislike Obsidian or Fallout New Vegas. And if they did, then I think they would have gone out of their way to not reference New Vegas at all. At the end of the day, guys, I don't think Bethesda hates/dislikes Obsidian or Fallout New Vegas. And if anything, I think there are plenty of people at Bethesda Game Studios that regret what happened to Obsidian. Maybe even some of the employees at ZeniMax regret what happened with Obsidian, as they did end up losing what was potentially a very promising developer. It also kind of makes you think about what could have been. Imagine if ZeniMax recognized the public reception of New Vegas and decided to acquire Obsidian. We could have had Bethesda working on Elder Scrolls and other projects, while Obsidian could focus on Fallout or whatever other projects that they decided to pursue. I think if there's anything you can take away from this video, it's that things aren't always as they seem. After all, there's plenty of things to suggest that Bethesda really likes New Vegas, as I don't think they would have included obscure references to New Vegas in Fallout 4 if at least someone at Bethesda Game Studios wasn't a huge fan of the title. At the same time, I do get why fans feel like Bethesda hates Fallout New Vegas sometimes. Admittedly, some of Fallout 4's retcons to the Fallout lore are pretty obnoxious, and the lack of prominent New Vegas NPCs and gear in Fallout Shelter is pretty disappointing. However, I don't think Bethesda Game Studios and possibly even ZeniMax hate Fallout New Vegas. After all, it made quite a bit of money for the latter, while it essentially helped define the template of the former's most recent single-player entry into the Fallout franchise. And while it's pretty unlikely that Bethesda will probably ever work with Obsidian ever again at this point, New Vegas will certainly be remembered for being one of the best in the series. Anyway guys, I think that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you liked this video, feel free to leave a like, and also feel free to let me know in the comments section below if you love or hate Fallout New Vegas. Otherwise, like this video if you liked it, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload more videos, and as always, thank you all so much for supporting the channel, take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.